Okay, this meeting is being live streamed, it says, so I think we're good to go. Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for being here today. If you didn't already know, it's Sam here with fellow author Galadriel Coffeen to talk about writing, reading, publishing, and more. Hi, Galadriel.
Greetings, humans.
Galadriel has written several novels and stories, I think mostly in the fantasy genre, is that right?
That is correct, all fantasy.
All fantasy, including the case of the Dragonbone engine, which I'm excited to hear about in just a little bit. But I'll let her tell you a little bit more about those in a minute. I'm very grateful that Galadriel has graciously agreed to be with us here today and answer some more of our questions. I believe this is your first author interview, is that right? So
it is my first official one, anyway.
Great. So I'm honored to be hosting that for hopefully an up and coming author who maybe you'll hear about later. Now, I do have some questions prepared, but let's also make this an interactive discussion. If you're watching today, if you're a fan, a reader, an aspiring author, just someone who enjoys fantasy or who enjoys this world, whatever, post your questions in the chat too about reading, writing, publishing, fantasy, fandom, or any of those topics. We want to hear from you too, and hopefully we'll have a good discussion. So I wanted to start off, Galadriel, I'll ask you, can you give us, for those who aren't familiar, a quick overview of your major works? You have multiple books out, I think, multiple series,
I do, yes.
maybe?
I have two novels. Oh, sorry, didn't even talk over you there. I have two novels and two short stories out so far. My first novel, The Case of the Dragonbone Engine, is a sort of gas lamp fantasy, not quite steampunk, more just Victorian Edwardian time period. It's a fantasy mystery. A newly built magical locomotive explodes, and the main characters, who are basically their culture's equivalent of FBI agents, have to investigate what happened. And there's just all kinds of shenanigans and jumping through clues and stuff that you always get with a mystery. Lots of fairy rights activism, corporate espionage, things blowing up.
Yeah, it sounds fun. Actually, I didn't tell you this yet. Actually, I did go to your website and I read the first chapter, and so I got the vibes of middle, or I guess like old style England, but maybe Victorian, mixed with the fantasy genre, mixed with the magic, and the mystery. So yeah, it was fun. Yeah, I'm interested to see more.
So the two short stories that I've written actually are part of that same series. They're not about the same character. They're about a side character from the novels, a young fairy who fairies are considered second-class citizens, have difficult time getting good jobs outside of the factories. So it's about a young fairy who's decided that she's going to learn how to drive one of the newly built magical motor cars.
Oh yeah. I'm the character in the first chapter.
Her name is Pretty.
I think I met her. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I've got two short stories so far about her and her boyfriend, just kind of more coming of age than mystery.
Sure. Are you focused more on the young adult genre, or for adults, or kind of in the middle?
So I've been classifying Dragonbone Engine and the stories that are attached with it as YA. I didn't set out to write to a specific age group or audience. It just kind of came out feeling like it would fit a YA audience. Sure. But it's not. I guess what I like to say is I write things that are appropriate for a YA audience, but not necessarily aimed at a YA audience.
That's fair. It's good to have a good range. Yeah. It's something that can be enjoyed by the whole family.
Yeah, I guess so.
And you mentioned you have a second novel too, is that right?
I do, yes. So the second novel, this is actually part of a different series, which I'm co-writing with my best friend Annalise Knopp. So we're both credited on the cover as co-authors. It's the first book in a nautical fantasy series. The main characters are both sailors in this series, and they have to deal with cannon battles at sea and rogue mages and slavers and sea serpents and things like that.
Of course. What's that one called? Did you tell us?
It's called Jubilant.
Okay.
That is the first book in the series, and we have about a dozen planned. So it's going to be a long-term.
Yeah, you're in it for the long haul. That's good. What's the process of co-writing like? I haven't done that before, really, but not very extensively. Is it fun? I mean, do your friend and you kind of mesh minds, or?
Oh, it's awesome. We have very similar writing styles.
Good.
We think very similarly. We have a habit of kind of completing each other's sentences and stuff. So we actually we write it as a text-based role play. Actually, we each take on the persona of one of the characters and chat back and forth using Google Chat, each kind of responding, writing the next paragraph. And then in the editing process, we kind of smooth it all together to make sure that the writing style matches and that the point of view switches between the characters aren't too jarring.
That does sound like a lot of fun. I thought about doing that before. I thought about doing it with my wife, who's also a writer. Haven't gotten to it yet, but having one person voice one character seems like the way to go, or whatever. But
it is a lot of fun. It's
very cool.
It does make for a slightly interesting narration style where we switch point of view frequently.
A lot of dialogue, maybe. Yeah. A lot of dialogue, maybe.
It can be sometimes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, how did you get interested in fantasy in the first place? I want to hear about maybe the things that have inspired you, your favorite books or movies or anything.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and guess maybe Lord of the Rings is among them.
Oh yeah, that had a little bit of an impact on me, possibly.
in your life, yeah. I think your parents are fans.
My parents are fans. Yeah, they named me Galadriel.
I had to ask you when I first started talking to you if that was your real name. I was like, is that a real name or a pen name? But that's an awesome real name.
That's my real name. Awesome. So yeah, obviously, as long as I can remember, that's been a part of our family, just being aware of those aspects of the fantasy genre of Tolkien and Lewis. I don't remember this, but my mom tells me that when I was about 4 years old, she was reading Narnia out loud to me before nap time. And that one day when she put the book down and, told me to go to sleep and left the room, she came back in and found that I had picked the book back up and kept reading it.
Wow. When you were 4 or so?
Apparently.
Okay. And you were able to read? I mean, I have a kid and he just plays with books, kind of trying to read, but
that's a story my mom tells. I don't remember it, but
sure.
I read Lord of the Rings for the first time when I was 8. I, at that point, was also reading Redwall, and a favorite of mine that I read so many times that the cover fell off was The Hero and the Crown by Robin McKinley.
Okay, I've heard of Robin McKinley. My wife's a big fan. I haven't read it myself.
A lot of fairy tale retellings, but that particular one is one set in a more unique world of hers.
Okay.
And yeah, I read that one to death. I read a lot of Ursula Le Guin, the Earthsea books.
Okay, yeah, I've heard her. Do you think any of those specifically, like, did they consciously or subconsciously influence your writing?
Everything you read is going to impact your writing in some way. They certainly gave me a love for fantasy, for world building. I started trying to create my own languages when I was about 10, and later realized that most of it was unnecessary and that I am not, in fact, a linguist, but I still really love the world building and stuff that Tolkien does, and I've always wanted to emulate that. Another thing is that Tolkien, in particular, illustrated his own books, and that's something else that I always really admired and have wanted to do. So I've made a point of illustrating everything that I've published so far.
I was going to ask you because I saw some illustrations on your website. You did those?
I did, yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Most of us, most fantasy authors even are not linguists like Tolkien. I mean, that's
we all want to be though, don't we?
But, yeah. He's a whole other level. But the illustrations, that's cool. Yeah. So multi-talented. You're writing and drawing, I guess.
Yeah. So I've done the covers for my books and interior illustrations and. And I mean, I'm also just a freelance artist, so that's
very cool. I didn't realize that.
More money doing that than selling books.
For now.
So
far, yeah.
So far.
You may have covered this already. Is there any story in particular that you've consciously based, like inspired any of your books? Or just kind of all of them about all the above?
To an extent. The Dragonbone Engine series, definitely a little bit of a Sherlock Holmes kind of influence going on there with the Victorian era mystery.
Sure.
Oddly, when I first started out this series, I was inspired by NCIS.
Okay.
I was back in high school. I had been watching a lot of NCIS, and one of the main characters, Agent Donovan, was originally very heavily based off of Agent Gibbs from NCIS. Okay. And later the plot and the world and stuff bore no resemblance to that inspiration, but there are still traces of Gibbs and Donovan's.
So it's like crime procedure in 1800s London with magic, kind of.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. I'm just curious because I recently read this one. Have you read any of the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher?
I have, yeah.
Okay,
So I actually read those much later. I had already written a couple drafts of Dragonbone Engine, which at that point didn't have a title and didn't bear any resemblance to the current plot. But yeah, it wasn't until maybe 6 or 7 years ago that I read Dresden.
Yeah, I read the first one recently. I'm a slow reader these days, just because I'm so busy. And it was fun. Yeah, it's a it's different. It's modern day. It's like hard boiled detective fiction.
Yeah, and I love Dresden.
Magic,
and definitely the earlier drafts of Dragonbone Engine, I would think, had a lot more in common with Dresden than how it ended up.
Yeah, you've made it your own thing. Yeah, which
so.
You need to do. We all take influence from other places. Me too. I mean, I'm writing a superhero novel. I've obviously been influenced by the genre and the major characters who are out there. But it's been said there's nothing new under the sun. So you just combine old things in new ways. So
yes, all the tropes are the same. It's just what you do with them.
Yeah, very interesting, very cool. What are you reading right now? Anything interesting?
I actually haven't had a ton of time for reading lately. I did recently start The War of the Flowers by Tad Williams.
Okay.
I'd never read any Tad Williams before. I know his Dragonbone Chair, what's the series called? Memory, Thorn, and Sorrow, I think is the title of the series, is pretty well known in fantasy circles. I believe the last book of that trilogy, to Green Angel Tower, is on the list of longest fantasy novels ever written. It's one of the ones that's like the publishers weren't sure if they'd actually be able to print it paperback because it was so thick.
Yeah, also like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, well, if I recall correctly, Tolkien wanted it printed as one volume and they couldn't do it until
that's what I thought.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I'd never read any Ted Williams before, but just picked this one up. I've only read the first chapter. I just grabbed it.
I was going to ask how is it, or anything interesting you can take from there, but hard to judge after one chapter. But
yeah, I can tell that it's something about fairies. That's about as far as I've gotten.
Which seems like it's right up your alley.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. You mentioned you don't have a lot of time these days. I understand, because we all have busy lives. I'm working full time, and I have a wife and kid, and I'm also trying to write and edit and do video content like this. So I mean, we're all doing that. You're a teacher, is that right?
Well, kind of.
Kind of.
So I was teaching high school at a private school, which kind of fell apart thanks to COVID.
I did that for a while too, a little bit before COVID, but yeah, so I understand.
So I was teaching high school classes up through this past spring. I guess that would be almost a year ago now. But then wasn't able to go back for the fall because just circumstances changed and the school was changing because of COVID. So I've been doing a lot of online tutoring, and then my freelance art, and it's honestly just a little bit of a mess right now. So
it's okay. If it's working, then great. Yeah,
it's working for the moment. We'll see.
Yeah, I was gonna ask like how do you find the time to write as a busy teacher? Maybe that freed up your schedule a little bit. I don't know.
It has been nice. I was only teaching part-time, not full-time, so I did have time. But yeah, doing the online tutoring, I've had a lot more freedom with my schedule, being able to pick when I want to do different things.
I know. I mean, when I've asked people like, what's the hardest part about writing, everyone says finding the time because everyone's busy. And I mean, you're still busy, obviously.
Time can be an issue. Honestly, I feel like the hardest thing in that regard is the time that you have lining up with your brain actually working.
Yeah.
It's difficult to write when it's like I'm exhausted and all I want to do is watch TV.
Do you have a routine? Like are you one of those people who's freshest in the morning and you do your writing in the morning, or what?
I do well with a variable schedule. If I'm doing the same thing too many times in a row, I get really bored with it. So sometimes I just get up and get going and write, and other times I'll just like find bits and pieces of time here and there through the day. The best is when I can manage to schedule an entire day just for writing, which
sounds wonderful.
A flexible schedule like this, I actually am able to do sometimes. I actually have a writing group that meets at my house on Saturdays, and we just have all afternoon set aside for writing, which
That's awesome.
is really nice, being able to just have that solid chunk of time and just sit down and get some stuff done.
I have not. Yeah, that'd be rare if ever for me. I don't know if I've ever had that, but that sounds amazing. Even just having one day where that was all you had to do.
It is
Yeah.
it is very nice when I'm able to do that.
Yeah, very cool. Okay. Well, yeah, this is, yeah, we're learning some interesting things so far, and you know, some things I wish I could do. Yeah. Remember, I think we have a couple of people watching. Remember, post your questions in the comments, and we'll ask, you know, we'll ask Galadriel some of these things too, and learn from what someone who's already published and who's on this journey too. I wanted to ask you, what are your biggest struggles with the craft of writing or editing? So beyond just finding time, I know everyone says that, but like with the actual process of writing, is there a, or writing or editing or any of that? Is there a part that's hardest for you? Hardest part of the process?
Endings are
Endings,
always
okay.
difficult for me. I know a lot of people go in with a very clear sense of how they want a book to end. I actually have a much easier time with beginnings and middles. And then I always have a difficult time figuring out how to tie things up at the end, that I usually know what needs to happen, excuse me, and the difficulty is figuring out how it needs to happen.
Yeah.
I outline my plot, but I discovery write my characters. So a lot of times I get to the end of a story and all of the final events have happened. And then I need some kind of like concluding scene, tie up the character arcs, make it feel finished. And that's where I really struggle, is that sense of, but it goes on.
Yeah.
Where does it end? Where's the end point? Everybody learns how to, or maybe not everybody, but it's easy to learn the idea of in media res, of starting in the middle of the action, of finding a good point to sort of jump in where you've kind of already started, but you found a good point to leap into the action. But how to drop out of the action, how to pull back out of the characters' lives and minds after a story, that's always the part where I have difficulty.
Okay. You mentioned, you said you discovery, right? Does that just mean kind of you figure it out as you go along, or you?
Yeah. So I am firmly of the opinion that the characters have minds of their own, and that they're gonna do what they're gonna do. And as long as it's in character, as long as it doesn't break the plot, maybe even if it does break the plot, then maybe my plot's wrong. But yeah, I usually will discovery write the first maybe quarter of a book, where I'll just kind of put in themes and events that feel right, that feel like they're building toward the major plot points that I want. And then once I've kind of got all the plot pieces in play, that's when I step back and outline and sort of figure, okay, these are all the themes and ideas that felt right to put in. Now it's time to actually piece them together and figure out how they all tie in and how the plot's going to come together. Then I keep writing to make sure I match that plot outline. But the characters, I still will kind of go with what feels right for their conversations and their character beats and their development.
Okay. So we talk sometimes about like the difference between, we call them plotters and pantsers before.
Yes, I'm a plantser. I'm halfway in between.
Yeah, it sounds like you're halfway between. Pantsers, if anyone hasn't heard, means kind of you fly by the seat of your pants. I'm very much a plotter. I'm a detailed person. Not everyone is like that. I mean, my wife is the opposite. It sounds like you're halfway between, kind of.
Yeah.
Which is it's good. Yeah.
I'm a plantser.
Again, flexible. Yeah. It's good to have a flexible schedule, a flexible plan, or I mean, in as much as it's a plan, but yeah, it's good you can do some of both. And how do you so you mentioned like you figure out as you go the characters are one of their own. How do you come up with characters in the first place? Like, I mean, you mentioned at least one you based on somewhat on a different character, but you just kind of, do the ideas come to you? Do you have to like brainstorm a little bit?
Characters are usually what comes to me.
Okay.
It's plot and world building that I spend a lot of the time thinking about building up and working out. Characters are just kind of there. And again, what I said a minute ago about feeling like they have a mind of their own, most of the time, the characters just feel like they kind of show up and they're like, hey, you're going to write about me now. And so I go, okay, what am I going to write about you?
Like, I don't know, just figure it out. Yeah.
And then that's the process. It's not who am I writing about, but what is their story?
Okay. Very cool. Yeah. Everyone has a different process. It's fascinating to me to hear the creative mind of someone and how these things come about in people's minds, because we all have fictional characters we love, and it's like someone dreamed it up at some
people
point.
always ask, how do you get your ideas? How do you develop the ideas? And it's so hard to explain to people who don't experience it, because how do you track that kind of intuitive, unconscious putting together of pieces. Like, I know the ideas came from somewhere. Obviously, there are influences. Obviously, there are things that came together in my mind to produce the idea, but most of the time I don't actually know what they were. It's just like, oh, well, I've read 50 books and watched 50 TV shows and saw a tree that was interestingly shaped, and suddenly there's a story.
There you go. I get it. I'm a writer. I have a hard time with that too. I mean, I have a hard time understanding the, I guess, subconscious part of it. I can tell you kind of the rationale I made in my mind after the fact, but like, where did this idea come from? I don't know. I've been consuming media my whole life and figuring things out from there. So really cool. You might have covered this already then, but then, so not a struggle, but what's your biggest strength in writing, do you think? Or what is one thing, maybe a couple things that your stories do really well?
Well, dialogue has always been really important to me. I put a lot of effort and practice into mastering that line between not realistic enough and too realistic in dialogue. That's something that you struggle a lot with, especially in like writing scripts and stuff. I know people have difficulty with, how many natural verbal tics and stuff do you put in? How natural is too natural? I mean, I just sat here and said how 3 times, but if you actually write that in your dialogue, it's going to look weird. Getting the natural kind of interactions between characters, character chemistry. One of the most important pieces of advice I ever heard about dialogue, unfortunately, I don't remember where I heard it or read it, but somebody once said that you should be able to take out all the dialogue tags and the reader should still be able to tell who's speaking. So I strive for my characters all to have distinctive voices that sound like them, so that even without dialogue tags, it's not difficult to figure out who's speaking. And it's like, yep, that line obviously belongs to that character.
That's good. It's hard to do sometimes. I have like 5 main characters and I've had to differentiate them and make sure I mean, to an extent, I'm always writing through them, but it's like, don't put it in the way I would say it, put it in the way this character would say it. And it's a growing art. You mentioned script writing. I took a script writing class once and I wasn't good at it. I'm a prose writer, but there's, I mean, I can do dialogue, I think, but like dialogue in a script, dialogue has to carry everything because I mean, you can put, I guess, stage directions in there or whatever, but dialogue carries a lot more of like the description, the setting and everything like that, or just because that's most of what a script is. So it's a lot.
I like to think that that's one of my strengths. After all the time and effort I put into mastering it, is hopefully I have good dialogue.
It's good. No, they also say that good dialogue is real conversation minus the boring parts. Basically. You mentioned the verbal tics. I mean, I'll put in things like repeated words or ellipses or the word
right. But then you got to be careful how much you use that, because it's a seasoning.
As I'm editing, I'm like, I can take some of that out. One, because I'm trying to cut my word count anyway, but also because I don't want to be too repetitive or make them sound too wishy-washy or
right. Unless it's a character who just happens to be repetitive and wishy-washy, in which case that's what makes their dialogue distinctive.
Yeah, that's true. One of my main characters, I mean, he's a little socially awkward. He's underconfident and things like that. So I give him things like that, but I'm like, I don't want to overdo it, make it overkill. So it's a tough balance to find. I'm in that struggle with you, but sorry. For you, that was not necessarily a struggle, but a strength. It's
I hope so.
It's one of the things that you said kind of comes naturally to you. So, do you do things? I wonder. Just after reading the first chapter, like do you do like dialects and accents and things like that in dialogue?
I usually don't.
Like
in my
British,
experience, in my experience, reading those is difficult. People who have done it, even people who've done it successfully, like
Mark
Charles
Twain.
Dickens and
Mark Twain is the master of that.
Twain, of course, is
I mean,
the master
Ryan
of it.
Jakes also.
Ryan
Jakes
is great at that. But even people who are really good at translating that dialect on a page, it's still hard to read.
Yes.
And I remember as a kid, getting through all those Redwall books, trying to read the mole speak,
Yep.
that Yorkshire accent every
I
time.
was just thinking that, like,
hearing it out loud, he got it onto the page perfectly, but trying to read it silently is just.
Yeah, no.
So I'll use individual words or phrases that will kind of hint at a dialect. Like that's something I do with the fairy characters, is I'll occasionally deliberately use poor grammar or use like slang terms and stuff, things like that, that'll help get across that they are, slightly less educated characters.
Sure.
But in terms of actual accent, I am much more likely to just include something in the dialogue tags indicating, oh, this person has a thick accent, or they're hard to understand, or they spoke strangely, or they rolled their R's, or you can indicate accent and dialect like that without actually making the reader slog through it all.
But generally the characters less be able to understand them, like but anyway, I mean, they have to be intelligible enough that the other characters can dialogue with them.
Right.
But it is hard to read. I mentioned my wife a lot. I think even she would have a lot of common interests, but she struggles with dyslexia. And I mean, she's now a writer and an English teacher, which is awesome. But she can't read Mark Twain. I mean, she can. Like she says, she appreciates Mark Twain for his literary genius, but for her enjoyment or whatever, she's not gonna go there, because it's just a lot to slog through. And I'm like, I get it.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone. Okay, that's interesting though. Yeah, dialogue is key, especially, well, I mean, it always is, but I feel like especially in character-driven stories, like where you really want your characters to come out. That's a lot of how we.
And I do write very character-driven stories most of the time. So
okay, that's cool. What is one writing or editing tip you can offer that you think most people either don't know or overlook, or what? Anything?
I'm going to say something a little weird, maybe. I think the best writing tip I can give is to ignore writing tips. There are a lot of people out there who have, made lists of writing tips, and, some of them are very valuable, have a lot of great ideas and great advice in them. But one thing that I've noticed a lot, especially in new writers who are kind of just trying to figure things out, trying to find their style, is that a lot of people will put too much stock in those kinds of lists and that kind of advice, and will kind of get caught up on it and be like, oh, but all these lists of advice say that I can't do X, or that I really should do Y, and then they don't find their own voice. And that's something that I actually struggled with for a long time, specifically with outlining, is that growing up, all teachers want you to do is outline, and they'll tell you over and over again how important it is, how vital it is that you have a good, solid, clear outline for your
5-paragraph essay and a 3-point outline and all that stuff.
Yeah, and creative writing isn't really taught in the same way. So that, of course, is where I was getting most of my writing advice, is from learning how to write essays and papers. And it wasn't until really I got to high school and I realized I write better essays if I don't outline them. Maybe that would be the case with creative writing too. And so, just a lot of times I feel like you should not pay too much attention to that writing advice until you've already found your style, and then go look at all those things and hopefully have a clear enough sense of your style and what you're trying to do that you know how to pick and choose, that you're able to look at those kinds of things and figure out, well, this piece of advice actually is very valuable for me, and this piece of advice doesn't really apply to my style or the stories I'm trying to tell.
That's good. But if we ignore writing tips, and should we also ignore the tip that says sort of ignore writing tips?
No, yeah, see, I don't know. Maybe it's tautological.
That's too deep. Sorry. No, that's good. I see what you mean. It's, I try to give tips sometimes in some of my videos, or just and even in my conversations, like I remember talking to my creative writing professor.
Do it.
Probably 10 years ago. What's that?
Squid, come here. Come.
Okay. And I mean, the usual advice is just start writing and like kind of let it take a form of its own. And I'm like, I really am a details person and a planner, and I mean, not everyone is like that, but I am. And he's like, hey, if it works for you, then do that for you. So most if not all writing tips come with a caveat of
if it works for you,
of do this if it works, but it's true. There is no formula for creative writing. Not really. I mean, I guess people have given formulas to plots and to things like,
Yeah.
character plus desire plus an obstacle equals conflict.
Sure. And all of those things are certainly valuable to understand for story structuring. And when I say ignore tips, I don't mean never pay any attention to the advice of other writers. I mean, don't rely too heavily on them. That's not what should drive your writing. That should be something you look at later in the process to see if there's any advice to help improve what you've already got.
Yeah, and I don't mean ignore story structure and tropes and things like that, but just don't put too much stock in the advice of other people. So that's good. So everything you hear today, everything we talked about, take it with a grain of salt, maybe a few grains of salt. Everyone listening at home, and we are hearing one writer's experience, or maybe two if I chime in once in a while. But this is, each great writer is very different. So thanks for sharing and giving us that. Yeah. Well, I have a few more questions, and we'll keep going. But again, anyone watching, I see a couple of people in the audience. Post your comments or questions for Galadriel too, and we want to hear from you. But for now, can you tell us about your publishing process? Did you do self-published or traditional, and how did you figure out which path was best for you and all that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I am self-published through Amazon using KDP, the Kindle Direct Publishing, which also lets you publish hard copies as well as Kindle.
Yeah.
And yeah, I did a lot of research in advance of choosing this path, trying to decide which was best for me. Honestly, the more I've looked at how traditional publishing works, the more I realized that it really hasn't changed in the past 100 years, and that a lot of what is standard for publishing houses is actually not good for authors.
How do you mean? Can you give an example, maybe?
So a lot of publishing houses increasingly are expecting authors to do their own marketing via social media and stuff. And originally, part of the advantage of going with a publishing house is that they would market for you. They would get things into the stores. Less than 30% of book sales actually take place in physical stores now. So having your book on the shelf is not nearly as big a deal as it used to be. And then, of course, if they're not going to be marketing for you, what's the point? A lot of publishers have actually also stopped paying editors. A lot of them have started expecting authors to already have an editor lined up.
Yeah.
And even the publishing houses that do still, offer editing and marketing and stuff like that, a lot of them, it's still not really worth the cut that they're getting. The average royalty that authors get through traditional publishing houses is less than 10% of total sales.
Wow.
Versus publishing on Amazon, you can get up to 70% of total sales.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously you're likely to sell fewer books if you're self-publishing on Amazon, but if you're making 70% royalties versus 10% royalties, you can make more money off fewer books if that's something that you're concerned about. One of the other big things that you can get from traditional publishing is your book has a chance of getting included on bestseller lists. There are currently no bestseller lists that will include indie publication. They will only.
There should be.
What?
There should be, I feel like, but yeah.
There are some smaller lists, some like online lists and stuff, but there are no nationally recognized lists of bestsellers or anything like that will include indie books. And so getting self-published means that, or getting published by a publisher means you have a chance of being on those bestseller lists. However, one thing I learned when I was looking at this is that those bestseller lists are very heavily curated and often don't actually reflect what the real bestsellers are. They're often bestsellers chosen from a list of bestsellers. So they'll put together a list of all the books that have actually sold best, and then curate that list, picking out the ones that they think are most worthy to be on the bestseller list.
It's not just the top 10 based on sales or whatever. It's not just the top 10
in terms of actual sales. It's their top picks from a list of top sales.
I didn't know. Yeah, I mean, it's not. I hadn't thought about that before, but it's not too surprising that magazines and stuff would do that.
Another thing you get from publishing with a publisher is that they'll do all of your layout and cover and stuff like that for you.
But you wanted to do.
But I wanted to do that myself because I'm an artist, and it means a lot to me to have my own artwork associated with the book on the cover and in the interior illustrations.
Yeah.
And doing the layout is kind of a pain, but knowing that I've got a font I picked and chapter headings I picked, that's also important to me artistically. So I wanted to deal with that process as much of a pain as it can be. So ultimately, it just seemed like self-publishing was the way to go for what I needed and I wanted.
Very good. Okay, well, thanks for sharing that information. I didn't know some of that. I mean, I was talking to you a little bit before we went live. I'm on my own publishing journey, and I'm interested in traditional, but I understand that's hard game these days. I'm not married to that by any means, so we'll see what happens.
With the number of smaller publishers that there are these days, it is actually relatively easy to find a middle ground where you can find someone who's going to help you with that process, but not completely take it away from you.
Yeah. My dad has published 2 novels. I mean, and I mean, I know at one point there was this idea of like, oh, you published a book, you've made it. And I mean, he still has to work. I mean, he's still an English teacher or professor, and it's. I mean, he publishes with a small company, so it's not like his are national bestsellers or anything. But
there are very few people in the world who can actually make a living off their books, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the dream. Maybe one day, maybe we're all working towards
that. We all dream for that.
yeah. But I mean, yeah, we'll see. Yeah, maybe I'll get there one of these days. But that's why we play the long game and do the research and do the work to build an audience and market yourself and all that stuff, and hopefully one day it'll pay off. I wanted to circle back to a few things you mentioned. So you publish on Amazon through Kindle. So you mentioned ebook format, I think. Do you have print versions too, or are they only an ebook, or what?
No, that you can purchase the Kindle version, a print version, or an Audible version.
Awesome. Okay. Do you do the audio recordings, or someone else does that?
I do.
Okay. Very cool. I've done some very amateur ones. They're not good quality or anything, but I'm sure yours are better. So
I mean, I'm kind of an amateur at it too, but
hey, it's okay. Well, yeah. And you mentioned an editor. Do you did you find an editor before you published, or?
I do not have a single editor, but I do have a pretty in-depth sort of beta reading process.
Yeah,
I have a couple people in particular who read everything. One person in particular, who actually is my co-author for Jubilant as well.
Right.
She reads all my drafts and gives amazing feedback. And she actually, I suppose, would be the closest thing I have to actually an editor. But then I'll send out versions once I've done a couple drafts. I'll send versions first to a small group of beta readers who I trust to give detailed and valuable feedback, who will go through and help me with plot issues, structure, characters, stuff like that. We'll do sort of the big editing, and then once I've gone through and done another draft, I'll send to a slightly bigger group of beta readers who give me more audience reaction kind of stuff. And with that, I'm able to then, narrow down for a final draft and figure out things like, oh, well, most people thought that this scene didn't quite work, so why don't I redo this one? Or the general consensus was that, this character didn't feel as evil as they were supposed to, so let's have him kick a puppy, whatever.
Yeah, if you get the same kind of comments from different people, then it's usually a good sign.
Yeah.
You mentioned this is a slight tangent. You have your writers group. You mentioned at Meets and Saturdays. Do you guys? Is it just writing together, or do you like read other works and critique them or anything? We have like a forum group. It's been really helpful to us where we give each other feedback.
Yeah. So there's 4 of us in the group. So the 3 other members of my group, they all do read and critique for me. They're all beta readers. But when we're actually in the writing group, we mostly are just holding each other accountable to actually sitting down and writing. It's nice to actually have other people in the room who are doing the same thing as you and be able to just look up and be like, so are you actually writing, or are you on Facebook?
Yeah. Do you this is also tangential, but have you ever done NaNoWriMo National Novel Writing Month?
I have done it every year since 2006.
Wow, that's impressive. I've done it like 4 times, and I've only won 3 of them because I got busy after college.
Sure. Yeah, I haven't won every time, but
yeah. Okay. Hey.
My way of thinking about it is, even if you only write 10,000 words, that's 10,000 more words than you likely would have written without that goal to push you.
So yeah, the last time I tried was like 2019. It was a busy time in my life. Anyway, this isn't about me, but it was right before I was about to move for a big job and everything like that. And I only got a little less than halfway, maybe 20,000. But anyway, I was going to say the good thing about that, the connection I was making, is they host those events I mean, it's been on your region and such, but yeah, we hang out at a library or a bookstore or coffee shop, and everyone who's participating writes, just kind of shows up and writes together, and it's I mean, sometimes it's quiet, sometimes you don't know what, I mean, I'm like, should I talk to these people or just should we write? But it's nice to have that camaraderie of different people in the same room just doing the same thing and kind of being in solidarity, like we're all trying to write a novel, which is a big deal, but that's what we're working towards. So that's pretty cool. Okay. Let's see, where was it? So you mentioned your books are available on Amazon. Is that the primary distributor? Or
it is, yeah. So one of the things,
a lot more than in bookstores.
But yeah, one of the things with Amazon is their royalty rates are different depending on whether you sell exclusively with them or not.
Okay.
And it's pretty significantly different. And since most people get things off Amazon these days anyway, I figured I might as well agree to the exclusivity. So I can sell print copies elsewhere, but in terms of distribution, it's all from Amazon. So nobody else is printing copies of my book. Nobody else is selling digital copies of the book.
Yeah, Amazon's one of the big names these days. I mean, I know they're competing widely with Barnes and Noble and stuff like that.
Yeah. And and a lot of people are saying, oh no, don't help Amazon gain a monopoly. But if that's where people are going to look to buy my books, then that's where my books should be. Yeah. So
that's a different tangent that I can comment on. Economics and all that stuff is a little out of my wheelhouse. But,
mine too. Yeah, so yeah, you can buy the digital, the print, or the audio off Amazon. I've also put copies in my local libraries. Donated some copies to a lot of bookstores. Not bookstores, cafes have started doing like little library shelves. That's cool. So I've donated some copies to places like that, which I don't know if people actually pick those up and read them, but they at least see them on the shelf there. Yeah. And there was actually one time already that I was selling my books at a convention, and at an artist convention.
Yeah.
People stop trying to call me. I was selling my books at an artist convention, and I had someone walk up and was like, "Oh, I saw that on the shelf in the cafe."
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
So and then they bought it. So even though they probably didn't pick it up off the shelf at the cafe, they recognized the cover, and that was the nudge they needed to go from that was cool to I'll buy this.
Yeah, I would think, and I'm just speculating because I haven't done it myself, but I would think that like putting them in a public place like that, like a cafe, it's more for name recognition than for someone's actually going to read it. I mean, maybe they'll sit down and read the back cover, or maybe the first chapter or something like that. I mean, who knows? But probably not going to sit there one sitting and read the whole thing.
But it means that people are seeing it, recognizing it, and that's what advertising is all about: is people see it and remember it. So
yeah, very good. Well, you've begun to answer this already, but one of my next questions was, what have you done or are you doing for self-promotion / engaging the audience / building an audience? That's part of the game these days, whether you're in traditional publishing or self-publishing. So,
and it's a part of the game that I am struggling to learn. So I've like I said a minute ago, I've put things in cafes and library and stuff so that people are seeing my work. Hopefully people are checking it out from the library and reading it, and then maybe they'll buy the next book in the series when it comes out. I unfortunately, because of COVID, the biggest thing that I was planning on doing has been kind of inaccessible, because I am a freelance artist and I attend a lot of art shows and fantasy conventions and stuff like that. So my big plan, the main thing that I've intended to do is to have a stack of my books with me at every art show I attend.
Yeah.
But there haven't been many the past couple of years. So
maybe they're starting to open up again, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, so I am signed up for some this upcoming year, so hopefully I'll be able to get back into that and actually start having my books with me at events. But yeah, so far it's really only been a few, but it's been a good start that every time I've had the books with me at events, people have stopped and looked at it and bought copies. So it's a start.
Yeah, that's good.
And, I'm doing things like, having an author interview with you. Hopefully get my name out to a few more people and be able to, share the video later once it's just recorded and not live anymore. And
so you hear that? Those who are watching either live or recorded, go check out Galadriel's work, because authors need that.
My first short story is free on my website, so you can get a taste of my writing without actually buying anything, and then decide if you like my style and want to actually buy a novel.
There we go. Yeah, I'm doing these videos. I'm having people on. To be honest, the marketing and audience building part is something I'm learning as I go along. Do you mind if I give you some quick resources to check out?
Please, by all means.
Couple of podcasts. I mean, they have other content, but I've listened to podcasts. Donald Miller, Building a Story Brand. He has this whole business thing about how, it works for any marketing almost. I mean, I'm not quite a marketing business guy. My day job is tangential to that. But I've also listened to it for building my audience here. So Donald Miller, Building a Story Brand. Connected to him is it's actually now called Business Made Simple, and there's another one called Marketing Made Simple with JJ Peterson. So look for those two in like wherever you listen to podcasts. There's another guy, Gary Vaynerchuk. He cusses a lot, so take that with a grain of salt if that's an issue to you. But he's one of the business gurus I listen to. So I've been listening to those guys for a couple of years, and I've learned some things. I'm not, I'm hardly the expert myself yet either, but I'd recommend just, they tell you things about how to build an audience and how to get people's attention and how to frame the story, or I guess frame your advertising so that it has more success and things like that. So I recommend that for everyone out there who's trying to promote yourself or build an audience or whatever it is. So there you go.
I mostly rely on my sister at this point, who happens to be very good at marketing. So
good.
I have trouble answering this question because I'm like, I just ask my sister what to do and she says, do this, and I do it. So
that's okay too. I mean, if you have an in-house marketing expert on your team or in your family, then more power to you. That's good. Yeah. So what do you have either in the works, either currently or for the future? I know you mentioned your long series. Is there anything else you're working on currently now?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dragonbone Engine is the first book in a trilogy. So I'm working on the second one, which is scheduled to come out next February, about a year from now. So I've been working on drafting that. I'm also drafting another short story, continuing the series of short stories that's connected with Dragonbone Engine. I'm working on the third short story. I was actually just writing that yesterday, so making some progress on that. And then the second book that I'm co-writing with my friend, we're working on drafting that as well. So that's what's currently in the works. That's what I'm working on right now. But I do also have a lot of stuff planned for the future.
Sure.
That's where my planning really is I tend to plan small and big and not have a whole lot of the medium in between. So I know exactly what I'm doing with this book, and I know what I'm doing for the next 15 years, but I don't know what I'm doing for the rest of this year.
Hey, one thing at a time, I guess. Yeah, that's okay. No one can have it all figured out, can they? I don't think so. Yeah, not yet. Do you have release dates for any of these, or projected release dates?
Well, the short story that I'm working on right now, the third short story, I'm hoping to get that out in July this year, so just in a few months from now. And then the second novel, The Case of the Golden Vigilante, will hopefully be out next February.
That sounds cool to me. I'm a superhero guy, so that sounds fun to me.
It's still a Victorian murder mystery.
That's okay.
It's not a superhero, but But yeah, so then that one
broad similarities anyway. Vigilantes, yeah.
Yeah. And then other projects further down the road, not entirely sure yet. We have a plan for when we want the second nautical fantasy book out, but life and careers and stuff may cause that to change. So
pesky things, get in the way of writing.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. Well, thank you for sharing with us today. My last question for now is, where can people follow you and your work online? Where do they go to buy your books or to follow you and keep up with the updates?
Yeah. Well, the hub of all my information is my website, which is just my name, galadrielcoffeen.com. And I have, information about my books and also about my art. I have excerpts and some short stories and links to purchase things all on the website there. All the purchase links just go to Amazon because that's where everything is published from. So you can also just find my stuff by searching me on Amazon. I also post on Twitter when I'm talking about art, not art, writing. I have an Instagram for my art.
Okay. What's your Twitter handle or Instagram handle?
Galadriel Author.
Okay.
So
at both?
You what?
Both Twitter and Instagram?
Instagram is Grey Haven Art. That's my art business.
Nice. Okay. Very cool. I like the name. Yeah.
Figured I'd go with something that was nerdy enough to bring the nerds in, but also just like kind of nice and neutral for the people who are like, oh, I want a pretty landscape. I'm like, I paint pretty landscapes.
There you go. Yeah.
And dragons. So,
Very cool. Okay. So your website, Twitter, Instagram, and are you on any other social networks?
I am on Facebook. I don't use it as much, but I will occasionally post on Facebook as Galadriel Coffeen Books.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing and for the wisdom and insights and just experience you've shared with us today. Anything else
you want to say? Any questions from watchers?
I didn't see any. Yeah. So not this time, I guess. I think we covered a lot of things.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. So there we go. Maybe I'll refresh one more time, but I try to be thorough. I ask questions, questions. So okay. Yeah, I have a couple comments. Thumbs up and a laughing face from earlier on from I guess this is maybe one of your relatives, Galadriel Coffeen. Yeah. And some one of my friends said thanks for all the info. So people were watching and listening. So that's good.
I'm glad I could talk about things. I hope there was some advice that was valuable to people or just some interesting moments or whatever.
Yeah. So there we go. Thank you for being with us here today. Anyone watching at home or listening to this after the fact, like my page, Samuel N. Harris, for future discussions and content for writers, or you can sign up for my mailing list at the link that's there in the description. When you sign up, you get a free sample of Fractured Heroes, my novel, and a few of my favorite scenes that I think you'll enjoy. And remember to go check out Galadriel's work too at her website and Twitter and Instagram and all those places. So thank you all for watching today. Thank you, Galadriel, for being here with us. And anything else you want to say to the people at home?
I think you had some good questions, covered all the basics. So
Okay. Well, thank you again. Everyone have a great weekend and keep writing and rocking and doing your thing. Okay. Bye.
Very well.